Welcome, I'm Leslie Nafusi. I'm joined today by Jane Langford, Senior Vice President, Legal at TD Bank Group. Jane is here today to talk about their win at the recent Canadian Law Awards 2021 for Canadian Law Department of the Year. Congratulations, Jane, on your success, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about my great team.
You are so welcome, Jane. So my first question is, how did TD's legal departments adapt to navigate the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's a great question, and one we've had an opportunity to reflect upon in the last few months. I think the truth is we were adapting before COVID hit. In the last few years, we've been really focusing on not just having lawyers who were deep subject matter expertise, but we also wanted to complement that with lawyers who had broad expertise that could play in different spaces. Second thing we were doing is focusing very much on lawyers who understood the technology and the operations that the business uses, particularly those around regulatory compliance. And so when COVID hit, we had an opportunity to see how well we were doing with that agility and that understanding of the business. And when we looked at the problems facing the business, our ability to really understand how they did things, to help them transform, particularly around the digital transformation that was necessary in a virtual world, finding ways to give advice pan-enterprise, because the same opportunities were popping up across our businesses. So that breadth of expertise together with that depth. And so we really had the opportunity to meet those challenges head on because we had been adapting in the years that preceded the pandemic.
Excellent. Moving forward into this and the new remote workplace, what types of innovation and creative thinking did your team adopt in order to remain both productive and efficient in the virtual world?
Sometimes people think innovation is a big thing, and what I am most proud of is the way in which we empowered our team to just innovate on their own, make changes, adapt as they went. So the things we did to be creative in the face of crisis are all tiny, but some of them quite material. First thing we did was we had daily stand-ups of all the lawyers who were supporting consumer-facing businesses. And those daily stand-ups allowed the team to share what was happening, to get some consistency on advice, to issue spot together. And then what we did is instead of having each lawyer go back and support their businesses, we said, well, why don't we have issue leaders? Why don't we have the one person give advice across the businesses with that area of expertise? And so that issue spotting capability came together in these daily stand-ups, and then we efficiently redeployed our resources to be consistent across the business. We also created some SWAT teams, particularly around health and safety issues facing customers and colleagues, and we had one SWAT team giving advice across the bank. Again, it's consistency, speed, efficiency that really worked well for us. We developed playbooks for the business. We're a small team. We couldn't be everywhere where the business needed us to be. So we reduced our advice to simple business instructions. We deployed that out and allowed the business to self-help. Come to us if you have to go outside of these boxes, but otherwise you're good to go if you follow these playbooks. We had also just launched, right prior to the pandemic, a new matter management system, which was the foundation of our knowledge management. And what we found was it threw people in. You had to use it to survive, but it provided an enormous amount of power for us. We tracked our advice. We created this advice tracker, and as long as everyone was putting their advice into the system and ticking it and tagging it the right way, we were able to immediately press a button and see data. Where were these issues coming up? Which businesses were struggling where? We were able to track our advice. And that meant when we had to pivot our advice when things were changing, because it was a very fluid environment, we were quickly able to go back and say, who are all the businesses that we gave this advice to? So really use the workflow and knowledge management features in our matter management system. And the last thing I think we did was redeploying our resources. We had most of the team was very busy. The pandemic touched every aspect of the bank and therefore every aspect of the legal department. But we took those, there were a few pockets of our department that weren't as busy, things like litigation because the courts were closed. And we redeployed our resources against where the risk was. So really flexing our muscles around how to triage where the risk, where to put the fires out and put our people against that. And so that agility of the team working together really was probably our biggest innovation.
Innovative indeed. Thank you, Jane. I understand there was an increase in the volume of work throughout the COVID-19 challenges for your team. How did you and your colleagues adapt to this increased workload?
And there was indeed, remains a lot of work. If you think about a bank, we continue to have to operate, and the legal department continues to give advice on what we call BAU, but the pandemic just added this layer on top. And I will be honest with you, some of the way in which we handled it was sheer heroics. We have a team of dedicated professionals, lawyers and the professionals that support them, and they really care about the customers. And we're in the customer serving business. And I think our team was very proud of the fact that banking is an essential service. And during the pandemic, people needed their banks. And so we had folks willing to stand tall and put in extra hours, and really proud and deeply grateful for the elbow grease and the hours that the team put in. But as the pandemic continued longer than any of us expected, that really wasn't sustainable. And we knew that we would suffer burnout very quickly. And so we did put in some measures to allow people to spell out. We switched the roles. I told you we appointed captains for issues. We switched them out. We started appointing people to be on call for the weekend and evenings so that others could have a weekend off, have the evening off. I told you we redeployed resources. We did that several times through the pandemic. I would also say we were relentless about telling the team, if this isn't urgent, if it doesn't need to get done right now, escalate and we'll put it away for you. We will, and the businesses were tremendous in supporting us, saying, look, we need your advice on this. So we'll let you put that other issue aside for a while. And so focusing on what was important to our customers, what was important to our businesses, allowed us to sort of push some work aside. And then lastly, I would sort of salute the resource teams across the bank. You know, we had tremendous rollout of technology to allow us to be more effective and efficient. And we had a team that was willing to embrace every tool that was invented for us and rolled out to us. And that really helped manage the workload. And we got better and better at that, and better at developing governance processes that would make us faster as we go. And that allowed us to give a little bit of relief to our terrifically dedicated teams.
That sounds awesome, Jane. Thank you. Now, looking forward into your team and their actions, in what way have you seen your colleagues showing support and concern for one another throughout this crisis?
This is the thing I'm most proud of, and I sometimes even get teary thinking about it. The pandemic is obviously deeply personal for all of us. It's a health crisis, which is a very different kind of crisis than we've certainly faced in our lifetime. And my team stood together even while apart. And I think that really came down to a recognition that this health crisis is very individual and it would impact people differently, and that we needed to respond to our teams, and our leaders needed to lead with flexibility and compassion. And so when you think about it, we knew we had team members who were caregivers, either for children or for seniors. We knew we had team members with families all around the world that they would be worrying about because they couldn't get to and support. We had team members who have medical vulnerabilities that made them at higher risk for COVID. We had team members who were isolated. We had team members who perhaps were working in environments that were not conducive to their personal wellness, their security, or their productivity. And what we said to our leaders was, lead first as a person, lead with your compassion. offer flexibility. So if we had workers that said, look, I've got to do shifts, I have a young baby at home, I've got my partner's going to do the morning and I'm going to do the afternoon, so I can only work in the morning. We said fine. If they said we want to work at night, we said fine. I want to go to a different jurisdiction. We supported their application. We basically said, we will be there for you. Your health and safety, your personal wellness is most important to us. And what happened when we as leaders did that was so terrific, as we saw that colleagues were doing that for each other. They stood tall, they reached out, they connected. And so that was a big part of it. I think we also realized that as disconnected as we were, we needed to stay connected. And so while we're not an office that places a huge amount of emphasis on social time together, we do at certain times of the year have certain rituals, but we really did increase our social connection virtually, of course, through the pandemic. And we had all kinds of things, from dance sessions on WebEx. We had people sharing their patios or outdoor spaces virtually. I meet weekly with a random group of people for a reconnect coffee. We were trying to replace the serendipitous collision at the water cooler with a virtual environment. And that really made a big difference. We also relentlessly held on to our treasured rituals. So we as a team meet on a monthly gathering, and people thought there was no way we could do that well virtually. We did. We found ways to get that done so that we could get together, and we changed up the agendas of those to make them far lighter, content that helped us bond, but not necessarily too serious, to bring some levity to it. The team on their own came to us and said, we want to do a newsletter. We want to share our tips to survive this. We want to share our recipes. We want to share our memes. We'll show photos of our funny home offices. So we put together a monthly newsletter that was very grassroots driven. We gave them pretty clean license to do what they wanted in that. And they came forward with great entertainment for each other. And lastly, we started a video. We're in the Oscar race for short films. We've been putting together films on topics. Most of them are funny. What's your happy place at home? And people would have little clips, and we have a great editor who puts them together for us. People's children and animals are showing up in these videos. And it's been a way, again, to bring a little bit of ourselves to the office, to provide relief from the relentless video calls. And that's really made a difference. And then the final thing I wanted to call out is that, the pandemic obviously has had a disproportionate effect on equity-seeking groups and racialized communities. And we know that. And then it came in the middle of Black Lives Matter came up. And more recently, the tragedy around our Indigenous history has been brought again to light in the most horrific way. And I think the truth is, we upped our dialogue. TD's very committed to this, but we upped our dialogue, and we started to talk perhaps more vulnerably about how each of us were feeling in our own journey of understanding. And we had some of the most raw conversations that we've ever had around these topics of inclusion. And I think in a strange sort of way, the pandemic enabled that intimacy, enabled that discussion. And I think it's made us stronger as a team, and we feel closer to one another. And that obviously helps us going forward to continue these really important discussions around diversity and inclusion.
Jane, I look forward to seeing what the rest of the year has in store for the team at TD Bank Group. Thank you so much for joining me today, and congratulations on winning this prestigious award.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun, and I'm really very honored to be able to speak on behalf of my terrific team.
Our pleasure. Thanks again, Jane. That wraps it up for this episode, and thank you for watching this TD Bank Group Winner Special on Canadian Lawyer TV.